Today I'm going to be talking about whether or not you should go to college. Now, I did a video on this a couple years ago that's really good and goes through many different perspectives, like Gary Vaynerchuk's perspective and another, Asian parents' perspective and so forth. However, that was before the pandemic and the remote learning that has been forced to sprout out. And this has kind of caused a acceleration of considerations such as whether or not you really need to be spending tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to undergrad and graduate school, often when you can get the same education at a cheaper price, either self-taught or through a lesser means, or it just questions what you're paying for. Like if you're not paying for the campus, you're not paying for the in-person experience, what exactly is it that people are paying for? And so, of course, a lot of universities are scrambling right now to really make the most of their system, but of course, it's kind of been many decades in the making. Now, so I want to address this from this new perspective and just give a more updated opinion on this, just my 2 cents. I believe that it depends on the job title. For many job titles, college is no longer a necessity. It is more so simply a cultural stage through one's maturing or adolescence through life. While some occupations, let's say engineer, doctor, lawyer, may require specific schooling, there's plenty of other careers where, the people who are most skilled that you want to hire are self-taught. They didn't pay tens of thousands of dollars to learn Photoshop. They learned it on their own through YouTube videos. Now with the rise of free and paid but less expensive premium courses on the internet, many topics are no longer gatekeeping by these really expensive schools. I was just watching a video of this man, Scott Galloway, who's apparently this NYU professor, and he said that when he went through school, undergrad and graduate, it only cost him $7,000. And he's talking about how the prices have been rising like crazy, the margins are unreasonable, and of course it's causing a lot of issues. And he's claiming the pandemic has simply just opened our eyes to it as a accelerator, not a cause. So where exactly should you stand on this? Well, many people are still not really sure what they want to do for a living. Maybe it's business, maybe it's something else. For these types of people, college may be a good place to try out a bunch of majors. Or maybe it could be better served to try out a lot of these things on your own through internships and so forth. Now there's more and more stories of people who are finding new ways of doing that. I saw a YouTube video the other day of an 18-year-old straight from high school who got hired at Google. I mean, talk about an impressive way of doing about it. Skipping college, applying straight to Google and getting it. Incredible there, but it's still your time to explore. Even your 20s are a time where you get to try and taste different job titles, industries, and learn about it. And it's your job to do that. School will help, but sometimes not as much as you think. Sometimes, especially some of the bigger schools, they'll just ask you, what do you want to do? You'll try a major, and it's up to you to tell that guidance counselor after a semester or two, hey, I'm actually not feeling this. Can we switch it up? Otherwise, they're not going to check in on you and like push you to try something else. So, if you have that specific thing that you're set on, like architecture, design, engineering, of course, college is a no-brainer. Those are pathways where you really can't get a lot of the credentials or material from it. And there's also biases out there still. There are people, I've heard stories where they will, this one guy, he got accepted, and then unfortunately they found out he didn't go to college, and he got his offer rescinded. Horrible thing to do. I think that's very discriminatory. But there's still some of that. However, I think this is being less and less of the case. If you look at a lot of successful business people, a a lot of successful creative individuals, many of these fields in particular, they claim that they really didn't learn much in school and they learned everything outside of school. Some of them even regret spending their money on their MBA. I mean, there's a couple of YouTubers that come to mind who talk about this all the time. One is Antonio Centeno of Real Men, Real Style, who runs this very successful men's fashion brand, and of course, basically paid for an expensive MBA program that really taught him nothing. Another one, there's plenty out there. There's John Lee Dumas of Entrepreneur on Fire, and then there's plenty more if you search the millionaire, eventual millionaire podcast, or there's even Kong Pham of Jump Cut Studios. He has a similar story. So when you package all this together and you see people who are choosing to purchase that $2,000 Shopify business course on how to drop ship versus spending six figures or $50,000 on a 2-year business program with a lot of stuff that you could probably learn online yourself, it really begs the question, what are you really paying for? And in some cases, it's worth it. What I mean specifically is that sometimes it's the network that you're really paying for. It's the prestige. If you can get into a top 3, top 5 school, as Jack Welch says, we're talking Ivy League, Harvard, UPenn, Yale, Stanford. These have so many smart people in that network that you gain a lot of benefit from forging those relationships. It's not so much a classwork anymore. So many people are theorizing that these type of prestigious schools will maintain its value. On the other hand, you have Warren Buffett claiming that he went to UPenn and he also went to Nebraska State. And he says, Nebraska State, when I went there, it was just as good as an education as UPenn. So there's also that element of, okay, if you can't get into a big Ivy League, you can still get the same education elsewhere. So, of course, now we get to the big point that I addressed at the start, which is the culture of it. A lot of people, I wouldn't say everyone, because there's obviously examples of people who really see no utility in college and, the path is clear to skip it. But there's many, maybe even most, high school students, kids, who see college as this cultural thing. Every one of their classmates are going to college. It's almost a given. It's almost like, if you want to continue with the rest of your community and your tribe, you go to college and then you make friends. And it's almost like the next stage of school, next stage of culture, where you're making friends, partying, drinking, and so forth. I think Gary Vaynerchuk makes a good point to an extent, but I disagree a bit when he says that, when he tells parents and kids, yeah, go ahead and pay for your child's 4-year vacation so he can party and drink, because that's all it is. And, he says that with nuance. He's talking to a specific group of people who are asking whether or not to go to college when they know they're not going to learn much, and they're, they know that the careers that they're pursuing don't require that type of education. And we're talking not doctor, not lawyer, maybe business owner. However, what I disagree with him on that is that to an extent, depending on how you interpret it wrong or right, you can think of that as a condemnation rather than something, and it's important to understand this perspective as well, rather than something that a lot of kids want. Not everyone wants. I mean, a lot of people, they don't really care for the partying or so forth. Plus, if you're like me, I wasn't really very much invited to those big parties anyways. However, a lot of people, they care about that stuff. They care about the parties. They care about the friends, the hooking up, the culture of just having fun. And they partially see it as this cultural stage in life. So if that's important to you, that's something you must consider if you want to go to school. And also you have to consider the possibility that you go there and it's a lot tamer than you would expect. That's been my perspective, and that's what I've heard. Most people are not like the TV shows and films where it's just, Party City. You may not even get invited to a party, or you may just get a much tamer campus, depending on, especially on the school you go to. there's a lot of small local schools or even larger commuter schools that don't really have that atmosphere. And there's other social gatherings and social activities like that aren't, alcohol and party focused that people may gravitate to. They see the grassy campus and they see people like playing football or volleyball or, having that line and almost like a balancing artist. I forgot what it's called, but slacklining or whatever. And they see that and they want that. They want to make friends and socialize, and it's a good time to have fun, but also connect with people, hit on girls, whatever it is. That's something that you must consider while making your decision on whether or not to go to college. For some people, that's the social experience that they would regret if they didn't go. Not so much the credits in academics. And even Gary Vaynerchuk says that, if he had one regret in his 20s, he would have had a bit more fun and hooked up more. Instead, he worked himself to death. So just think about that. It's not all about, climbing that corporate ladder, getting all these credentials so that one day in the distant future you can succeed. That's very important, and you should pay some attention to that, because you have the opposite end of the spectrum where people don't pay attention to that, and then they're screwed later in life. But you also want to have some happiness and enjoyment and minimize regrets throughout your life. So you have to take that into account. And if you decide that's a factor, make sure you choose a school that actually embodies that. As I mentioned, there's a lot of even state universities that are deceptively less of a party school than it may seem. So there you have it. I think it really depends. And there's so many job titles out there, more than the typical things that people just think are the only options. And so for most of these, for example, the product manager, project manager, user experience designer, user experience researcher, all these different titles that you've never heard of: software engineer, vendor recruiter, technical recruiter. These are things that oftentimes the traditional model of school doesn't teach, and if they do, they don't teach it well. Even the business topics, like not really taught well. You could probably learn accounting 101 on your own, or through even iTunes U at a free price or reduced price. So realize that if it's not really something that offers much utility, you can be open to the idea of skipping. And think about it, you can always come back. Usually if you come back at a later point, especially at a larger school, no one cares. Everyone's just focused on themselves. When there's like 100, 200 people in a lecture hall and they're all focused on studying, they're not going to ostracize you just because you're a few years older. They may not even notice the difference. So you can always come back. It's not like it's gone forever. And through all that, you can get, you can figure things out. And of course, if you prefer, if you're looking at the courses and things that they teach, and you've already a bit further along in your journey, and you think, a lot of these majors are not stuff that I really have much interest in, and the things I do, they don't teach, find another school or consider the possibility of skipping. As I mentioned, paid social media manager, vendor recruiter, technical recruiter. There's so many titles out there that you can maybe get more education out of by finding someone on LinkedIn and shadowing them, having them be your mentor, interning at that company. That can do you a lot more good than some fancy college degree, which is just a piece of paper. And when you look at it from the creative lens and a lot of these creative jobs, on the resume, most of the time it's just that. It's just, I got this degree at this university. It's almost like that's all you get for all your work there for certain jobs. And so when you think about that, you wonder, was that all it was? 2 lines on a resume that most people have and most hiring managers look past. So once again, it depends on your stuff. I personally, if I could do it again, I would still go through college. And that's because of my my personal preferences. I just felt like it was a stage of my life, the social, the cultural thing that everyone else seemed to go through, and I didn't want to miss out on that. I wanted to experience what it was like. And it was okay. It was not some epic thing where there's parties everywhere. In fact, some weekends were pretty darn boring. There's nothing much to do. But still, at least I knew what it was like, so that I don't have any regrets or of thinking of like what if, or wondering what would it would be like if I had gone. So that was my personal thing, and it's totally different from yours. I mean, there's a lot of people who, especially YouTubers. You have Ryan Higa, skipped college, made millions on YouTube. All depends on what you want to go for, and that's it. Have a great day. Enjoy.